How could you forget something so simple, Clara? Emily would never be this careless. Beatrice's voice sliced through the quiet hum of the kitchen fan, her words wrapping around me like barbed wire. I froze, the spoon in my hand paused mid-stir as the pressure in my chest tightened. The soup simmered gently on the stove, its comforting aroma filling the room, but all I could taste was the acidity in her tone. I'm Clara Mason. I'm 32, a nurse, and for the past 3 weeks, I've been living in my mother-in-law's home, taking care of her after surgery. I juggled my hospital shifts and sleepless nights to be here, not because I was expected to, but because I wanted to. I hoped that, maybe, the time and effort would bridge the emotional gap between us, a gap that had existed long before I moved in. But no matter how much I gave, it never seemed to matter. Everything I did vanished in the shadow of Emily, her beloved daughter, who stopped by once a week with perfect timing and even more perfect smiles. I didn't know how to respond. My mouth was dry, and every word I wanted to say caught like thorns in my throat. Beatrice turned away, muttering under her breath, her disapproval thick in the air. Emily, as usual, was late for her weekly appearance, but that didn't stop Beatrice from treating her as if she were the one who'd been here all along, tending to her, feeding her, supporting her through every groan and sigh. Careless. The word throbbed in my mind like a bruise. I'd rearranged everything to be here. I'd skipped dinners, switched shifts, even missed my anniversary with Ben, all to sit beside a woman who didn't seem to notice or care. And here I was, being scolded for not salting the soup just right, while Emily would show up, flash her camera-ready grin, and walk away with all the credit. I stared into the pot, my hand trembling slightly as I stirred. A slow burn rose inside me, not just from Beatrice's barbed remarks, but from the way Emily always knew how to manipulate the spotlight. She knew how to look like the devoted daughter, how to time her visits for maximum praise. And she knew I wouldn't say anything. Not until now. Just as I opened my mouth to speak, the front door creaked open. Emily's entrance was as perfectly timed as ever. Her heels clicked confidently on the hardwood as she breezed in, a bouquet in one hand and her phone in the other, like she'd just popped in to grace us all with her light. "Smells amazing in here," she said cheerfully, her tone light and polished. She spared me a brief glance, just enough to flash a lingering smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, before turning her full attention to Beatrice. "How's my favorite girl doing today?" she sang, leaning in to kiss her mother on the cheek. Beatrice's face lit up instantly. Whatever irritation she'd had with me melted away like it had never existed. "Emily, darling, perfect timing. I was just explaining to Clara how important the small details are, not that she really gets it," she added with a sharp look my way. Emily set the flowers on the counter and chuckled softly, her voice dripping with fake charm. "Oh, Mom, I'm sure Clara's doing what she can," she said. Then she turned to me, expression unreadable. "Don't worry, Clara. Taking care of Mom can be so overwhelming. Trust me, I'm figuring that out too." Her words were sweet, but they landed like a slap. And for the first time I didn't shrink from it. I had had enough. I clenched my jaw, the words threatening to burst out. But before I could speak, Emily was already in motion, pulling out her phone in that all-too-familiar ritual. She leaned in next to Beatrice, angling the camera just right, her smile perfectly polished. "Just want to capture these sweet moments," she said lightly, like she hadn't just hijacked the atmosphere I'd worked so hard to maintain. As she scrolled through her photos, likely hunting for the perfect filter to fine-tune her loving daughter aesthetic, Beatrice sighed with warm satisfaction. "It's so nice to have both my girls here," she murmured, her gaze lingering on Emily. Though I must say, Emily always knows just how to make me feel special. The words hit me harder than I expected. Both her girls. Special. I tightened my grip on the ladle, the heat from the stove suddenly feeling insignificant next to the burn in my chest. 3 nights. I hadn't slept through a full night in 3 days, waking every few hours to help Beatrice turn, adjust her medication, and make sure she had everything she needed. Emily? She floated in for photo ops and vague promises, then vanished like a ghost cloaked in virtue. Mom, Emily said, her tone light, casual. I was thinking I might bring you that herbal tea you like next week, you know, the one from that little boutique downtown. Things have just been so hectic at work, but I'll make time. Beatrice lit up instantly. Oh, Emily, that sounds lovely. You're always so thoughtful. That was it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Thoughtful? The word came out before I could stop it, too sharp, too loud. Both of them turned to look at me. Beatrice's expression tightened in confusion, while Emily simply kept smiling, her eyes cool and unreadable. She drops by once a week for a few selfies and vanishes, I said, the anger bubbling to the surface. I've been here every single day, doing everything to keep you comfortable. Emily's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew. But her eyes hardened, just slightly. Clara, she said smoothly, I didn't realize this was a competition. We all support Mom in our own ways. Some more than others, I muttered, turning back to the stove. The shift in the room was immediate, dense, silent, charged. But I wasn't about to let her smug deflection stand uncontested. Still, the moment the words left my mouth, guilt followed. Even though I'd spoken the truth, I hated how petty it sounded, like I'd reduced all this pain, exhaustion, and care into a tally. That wasn't who I wanted to be. Later that night, I slipped into the guest room, shutting the door gently behind me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone already in hand, heart heavy. Ben picked up after just 2 rings. His voice was warm, familiar, but distracted. Hey, everything okay? No, I said, my voice breaking free before I could censor it. I'm exhausted, Ben. I've been doing everything for your mom, managing her care, losing sleep, making sure she's okay, and she doesn't even notice. Emily waltzes in with flowers and a plastic smile, and suddenly she's the golden child. He sighed, a long, weary sound that crackled softly through the line. Clara, you know how my mom is. She's always been that way. You can't take it personally. I know what she's like, I shot back, sharper than I meant to. But that doesn't make it any easier. Do you have any idea what it's like to show up every single day, to give so much of yourself, and still feel like you're invisible? My voice cracked on the last word. I paused, breathing hard, willing the lump in my throat to go away. I just needed you to understand. Ben's voice softened, the edge of his usual practicality giving way to genuine concern. Clara, maybe it's time to take a break. You've done more than enough, honestly, you've done everything. Why not come home for a week? Let Emily take a turn. I miss you, and you need to take care of you too. His words caught me off guard, loosening the tight knot that had been sitting in my chest for days. The idea of being home again, of sinking into our shared bed and curling up beside Ben, felt so painfully appealing that it made my heart ache. But then I thought of Beatrice, so fragile and yet so fiercely difficult, and the guilt crept right back in, heavy and relentless. I don't know, I murmured. What if she needs me? She'll manage, Ben said gently but firmly. You've been incredibly generous, Clara. More than anyone could have asked. It's okay to take a step back. Taking care of yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. Ben and I lived 2 hours away in the cozy apartment we'd called home for 5 years. When Beatrice's surgery was scheduled, I had offered, without hesitation, to move in and help with her recovery. Ben had wanted to come, too. He loved his mom, quirks and all, but he was neck-deep in a critical project at work, full of deadlines and long hours he couldn't abandon. He called every day to check in, always asking how I was holding up. I knew it killed him not to be here, and I never held it against him. He was doing his best, just like I was. I let out a tired sigh, gripping the phone tighter. It's not that I don't want to come home, I really do. I miss you. And I'm tired, Ben. But I can't just leave her like this. She still needs someone here. There was a pause on the other end. Then Ben's voice returned, steady and kind. I understand, Clara. You care about her, even if she doesn't always show that she cares back. But please, just think about it. You've been everything to her since this started. You deserve to take a breath. I'll think about it, I whispered, my throat tight. I promise. It was the only thing I could say. Whether I meant it or not, I didn't know. The next morning, I found Beatrice in the living room, perched stiffly in her armchair with the television humming quietly in the background. She didn't acknowledge me as I stepped into the room, her eyes glued to a weather report. I hovered for a moment, debating whether to offer a warm good morning, but before I could say anything, she turned to me with a familiar look, the one that always made my stomach drop. Clara, she said sharply, I couldn't help but notice how late dinner was last night. You do realize it's bad for my digestion to eat that late, don't you? I blinked, caught off guard. Dinner was ready right after Emily left. I thought we agreed. Yes, because you didn't have it ready earlier, she snapped, cutting me off mid-sentence. When Emily is here, things feel more organized. She doesn't need instructions. I clenched my hands into fists at my sides, fighting the words that burned on my tongue. Emily was here for less than an hour, I replied, carefully keeping my tone neutral. She didn't even stay for dinner. That's not the point, Beatrice said, leaning forward with a sharpness in her eyes. Emily knows how to handle herself. She doesn't wait around for me to tell her what needs to be done. She's considerate. The word hung in the air like an accusation. And in that moment, I felt it, that familiar, quiet ache. The one that told me no matter how much I did, no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. Not for Beatrice. Not compared to Emily. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. Beatrice, I've been here every single day. I've done everything I can to make sure you're okay, comfortable. She didn't hesitate. And yet somehow, it always feels like a chore. Her voice turned icy. You're here in body, Clara, but your heart's clearly somewhere else. You act like being here is a favor you're forcing yourself to do. Her words hit hard, slicing through the fragile calm I'd been clinging to. That's not true, I said, my voice tight, trembling despite my best effort to stay composed. I put my life on hold for this, for you. Oh, how generous, she snapped, her sarcasm practically dripping. If it's such a hardship, Clara, maybe you should have left it to Emily. She's got a full schedule, yes, but at least she doesn't make me feel like I'm a burden every minute she's here. My lips parted, but nothing came out. The frustration, the hurt, it all swelled in my chest, but I knew that if I let it out now, things would only spiral. So I straightened up, voice low but steady. I'm doing the best I can. I'm sorry if that's not enough. She gave a dismissive wave of her hand and turned back to the television. Your best has never been what I needed, Clara. Emily gets me. You never will. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with disappointment and resentment. Her words lingered like smoke, heavy, inescapable. Without saying another word, I turned and left the room, heading straight for the guest room. I didn't let the tears fall, not yet. Not where she could see. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the neatly folded clothes in my suitcase, my thoughts spinning. Beatrice's words echoed in my head, each one a slow, twisting knife. I had given everything over the last 3 weeks, my time, my energy, missed shifts, cancelled plans, even skipping my anniversary with Ben. And somehow, none of it mattered. None of it ever did. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages until I found the one from Ben. You've done enough, Clara. Please come home. The words felt heavier now, but also clearer. Ben was right. I had done enough. More than enough. I had shown up, day after day, sacrificing parts of myself in hopes of building a connection that was never going to happen. And meanwhile, Beatrice held Emily on a pedestal I would never reach, no matter how much I gave. I wiped at the corners of my eyes, refusing to let the tears win. This wasn't quitting. This was understanding my limits. Recognizing that my worth wasn't defined by Beatrice's approval, or lack of it. It was time to go home. That afternoon, I knew I had to say something. I couldn't just vanish without speaking my truth. The air between us felt tense, thick with unspoken things. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped into the room, this time with resolve in my voice. "Beatrice," I said, calm but firm, "we need to talk." She glanced up from her chair, her expression unreadable. "If this is about dinner, I'd prefer you focus on getting it right instead of wasting time." My jaw clenched, but I didn't back down. "No, it's not about dinner. It's about how I've been treated since I came here." Her hand stopped mid-stir, spoon suspended over the pot, and she finally turned to look at me, one brow arched in cool defiance. "Oh," she said, her tone clipped. "And how exactly have you been mistreated, Clara?" I inhaled slowly, the words rushing out before doubt could silence them. "I've been here every single day," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I've rearranged my life, sacrificed events, missed out on important things just to be here for you. I've poured myself into your care, into making sure you're okay, and still, you treat me like I'm invisible. Like nothing I do is ever enough. I'm exhausted, Beatrice. And honestly, I'm done being treated like I don't matter." She placed her spoon down with a sharp clink, folding her hands in front of her like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Well," she said, her voice as cold as marble, "if you're so tired, Clara, no one's holding you hostage. Honestly, Emily would probably do a much better job anyway. She always has." The words cut deeper than I expected, but I didn't let it show. I stood my ground. "Emily isn't here," I said, more firmly this time. "She's never been here. Not for more than a short visit with a smile and a few pleasantries. I've been the one lifting the weight, but if you think she's better suited for it, then fine. I'm out." Beatrice's expression didn't change. Her eyes stayed hard. Unmoved. "Good," she said flatly. "I won't miss the attitude. At least Emily knows how to be respectful." I nodded slowly, her final words settling in my chest like cold stone. "Well," I said, quieter now, "I hope she gives you what you need. Because I'm done." And with that, I turned and walked away. My throat was tight, but my spine was straight. It was over. I was finally done. Back in the guest room, I packed in silence. Each item I folded, every drawer I emptied, felt like a layer of burden peeling off. Her words still echoed in my head, cruel and deliberate, but I shut them aside with the rest of the past. I'd given everything. And she'd thrown it away. Once my suitcase was zipped, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone. My thumb hovered over Emily's contact before I hit call. It rang a few times before she finally picked up. "What now, Clara?" she answered, her tone clipped and clearly annoyed. "I'm kind of in the middle of something." I kept my voice even. "I'm leaving," I said. "My things are packed, and I'm going home. Beatrice still needs someone around, so congrats, you're on duty now." "What?" she snapped, the sharpness in her voice cutting through the line. "Wait, what are you talking about? You can't just leave." "I can," I replied calmly. "And I am. I've done my part, Emily. Now it's your turn." She let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, sure, just dump everything on me. Do you have any idea how much I have going on right now? I can't just drop everything, Anne." I didn't let her finish. I'd heard enough. 4 days passed. I avoided thinking too much about Beatrice or what might be happening back at that house. I focused on being home, letting myself breathe, trying to feel like me again. But that night, when my phone buzzed and I saw her name on the screen, a knot immediately formed in my stomach. A part of me wanted to send the call to voicemail. But curiosity, and maybe some lingering guilt, won out. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Clara." Beatrice's voice crackled through the line, sounding thinner, more fragile than I'd ever heard it. I need to talk to you." I hesitated. "Is everything okay?" "No," she said, and the word carried a weight that caught me off guard. "Emily hasn't been here since you left. She barely returns my calls, and when she does, it's always work this or too busy that. She promised me she'd help. I didn't say anything, just let the silence stretch. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky, uncertain. I've had to do everything myself, Beatrice went on, her voice trembling. Some days, I can't even manage the stairs. I don't know what to do, Clara. I feel completely abandoned. Her words sank deep, stirring up a storm of emotions, sympathy, vindication, and a tight, dull ache that had been with me for years. She had pushed me aside, made me feel like a shadow, and now she was beginning to understand what that felt like. I'm sorry to hear that, Beatrice, I said at last, keeping my voice even. But I did warn you. Emily talks a good game, but she's never been the one who follows through. There was a long silence, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, uncertain. I didn't think she'd just leave me like this. I thought she cared. I stayed quiet. There was nothing to add, she was finally seeing the truth. I took a breath, gripping the phone tighter. I'm sorry you're going through this. I really am. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, I said, calm but firm. But I can't just come back. Not right now. There was a beat of silence, and then her tone snapped back to the cold edge I remembered all too well. What do you mean, not right now? I closed my eyes, steeling myself. I knew this conversation wasn't over, not by a long shot. I can't drop everything again to come back, I said firmly, though the words felt heavy in my chest. Beatrice, when I was there, you made me feel invisible. I gave everything I had, and you treated me like I was nothing. I can't go through that again. Her reaction was instant and fiery. Oh, so now you're holding a grudge, she snapped, her voice rising with each word. You think you're perfect, Clara? That I didn't notice the mistakes you made? Don't act like you're some kind of martyr. You've never been good enough for this family, and now you're just proving it. Her words struck deep, but I forced myself to stay composed. I'm not claiming to be perfect, I said quietly. I know I messed up sometimes. But I tried. I gave everything I could. And you never saw that. Now you want me to pretend it never happened and just come back. I can't. Beatrice let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Typical. You're just like the rest, selfish. At least Emily would never turn her back on me like this. I hesitated only a second before replying. Emily already has, I said softly. There was a long, stunned pause on the other end before her fury reignited. Don't you dare talk about Emily that way, she shouted. She has her reasons, not like you, looking for any excuse to quit. My throat tightened, but I held firm. I'm sorry you feel that way, Beatrice. But I can't come back, not when nothing's changed. Before she could say more, I ended the call. My fingers trembled as I set the phone down, the sting of her words lingering in the air. But I knew I'd done what I had to do. I wasn't going back, not to that. The days that followed were quiet. I walked more, talked things out with Ben, and tried to let the tension in my chest slowly ease. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself start to breathe again. The peace I found was fragile, but it was mine. Then, 5 days later, my phone buzzed. It was her. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Finally, I inhaled deeply and picked up. Hello. Clara, Beatrice's voice cracked, barely above a whisper, soaked in tears. Clara, I'm so sorry. Her sobs came in broken waves, the words spilling out in fragments. I've been thinking about everything. And I can't believe how I treated you. You didn't deserve that. Any of it. I don't even know why I said those things. You gave so much, and I just pushed you away. I sat down slowly, stunned by the shift in her voice. Beatrice, I began, but she cut me off. No, please, just let me say this, she pleaded, her voice raw. I've been so blind. You didn't have to come here, but you did. You were there for me when no one else was. And I treated you like you didn't matter. Her crying deepened, and I felt my heart clench. Emily hasn't shown up in days, she whispered. And now I get it. I see what you meant. I didn't deserve your kindness, but you gave it anyway. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears welled in my eyes, her sincerity piercing through the wall I'd spent so long building. I drew in a shaky breath, grounding myself. Thank you, Beatrice, I said quietly. You don't know how much that means to me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she whispered, her voice raw and trembling. But I needed to say it. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond right away. I sat there in stillness, letting the words settle around me like soft rain after a storm. I'll need time, I said at last, my voice calm but certain. But I appreciate you saying it. That's a beginning. It is, she said, her sobs tapering off. I'll try to be better, Clara. I really will. When the call ended, I placed my phone gently on the table, my chest heavy with emotion, but somehow, lighter too. For the first time, I could see a way forward. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe it wouldn't be fast. But it existed. And that was enough. After Beatrice's recovery, things changed, slowly but noticeably. The sharpness in her tone gave way to warmth. The tension that had once hung between us like smoke was replaced with real, honest connection. Her words grew softer. Her presence more mindful. She went out of her way to show appreciation in the smallest gestures, a thank you, a shared laugh, a glance that held something like pride. The past was still there, undeniable and imperfect, but it no longer hovered like a shadow. For the first time I felt seen. I felt valued. And that changed everything.